Excellent. We're getting started here. So welcome. This is Successful Relationships, Power BI and Project Online. My name is Mark Reed, and I'm a principal consultant for Sensei Project Solutions. So who is Sensei Project Solutions? So we're a thought leader in the Microsoft project and PPM space. We were Partner of the Year finalist in 2017, a winner in 2014. We were a finalist in 2015 as well. We've done hundreds of PPM deployments, and we've trained thousands of project managers and team members, and we are a thought leader in the global space. This is me. I'm a principal consultant at Sensei Project Solutions, PMP certified, also have my MCTS for project and project server. And I'm currently serving in the PMI community in my local chapter. And I am based in lovely Carmel, California. So what are we going to do today? Today we're going to take a quick overview of some of the applications, project and project server, as well as Power BI and the Power BI service. And then we're going to dive into some understanding of the project data model. So as we build out these Power BI dashboards, we need to know how to build relationships between the project tables so that we have a good, a really good model and a good result. You'll see I'm going to go through a couple of examples in the exercise of a model with relationships and a model without relationships, and you can see how Power BI reacts in both situations. Again, if you have questions, please put them in the question pane, and then we'll answer them probably in the last 5 or 10 minutes of the presentation. Okay. So just a brief overview of the Microsoft PPM platform. You've heard EPM, you've heard PPM. What is it? It's project on the desktop, project online, or project server on premise. That's the database that's in the middle. And then you've got this web app that allows you to engage and build relationships based on data with your audiences. I like to say that the reason why Project Server was invented was to distribute this rich information in the Project Pro client out to team members, resource managers, executives, people who normally need to pester the project manager to get the status of the project. Where are we? What's our finish date? Why are we doing this? And so you've got a rich interaction of proposals and templates and schedules. You've got task assignments being able to be pushed out from your schedule out to the web so that people can respond to that. What date was that task supposed to start? Boom, you publish your project and then it's available to your team. So you build these feedback loops, these sort of virtuous cycles of data that is live, hopefully, data that is up to date, hopefully, and that you have the ability to share this information so that you get a richer data-driven relationship with your team, with your stakeholders, with anybody that's interested in the work that you're doing. Now, Power BI has developed over the last couple of years. They've been growing it, leaps and bounds. They're releasing every month. It's very exciting, and that also has a desktop piece. So your report authors will author in Power BI desktop, and then they can publish it to the Power BI service. That allows them to distribute dashboards, alerts to your report consumers, whether they're web-based or whether they're on a mobile device and they're looking at, querying your data. So it's very rich. People can say, well, show me all of the projects that are due this month. and start to build natural language questions. There's a data refresh going on. There are custom dashboards. There's gateways. There's a ton of rich functionality in this ecosystem. So Power BI is a natural complement to your project undertakings because it allows you to distribute the information even further out onto mobile devices, and it allows you to keep your data fresh because that service is doing refreshes and gateways and all of that good information. So a couple of key links, and this is, if you want to follow along, definitely want you to be able to download Power BI Desktop. You can get that from powerbi.microsoft.com. And you can also, the Power BI content pack that was just released, you can enable that in your Power BI service. You can also get the desktop file from GitHub so you can edit it. So if you're interested in editing that Power BI content pack that Microsoft just released that has a very complex set of relationships in it, then we can take a look at that and you can work on it. So what does Power BI stand for? Thank you, Eric, for that question. So it's business intelligence. So it's really it's a product name, Power BI, but it's really talking about being able to unlock goodness, unlock data, unlock observations and things to be able to see about your project data. So, okay, so that's how you can get the data. Now, your data, especially in this cloud-centric world, could be in Azure, could be in OData, could be in the cloud somewhere, and you can access that by particular methods, or it could be on premise. So if you have Project Server on premise, you have a SQL database and you can access that. So depending upon where your data is, you may use different methods to access it. So OData is a standard that's been developed recently, at least in terms of SQL. So it's a little bit younger. It's a little less functional. SQL is the grandfather of data access languages and has a great deal of functionality, the ability to do various different joins. And so depending upon where your data is, may limit how you can access that data. What we've done at Sensei is that we've actually developed an Azure data mart that goes along side of a Project Online instance that allows us to do SQL access to the Azure data mart while it's synchronizing via OData with the PPM instance. So a lot of rich functionality there. But just knowing where your data is and then will determine how you can connect to it, and then what the functionality is that gets revealed there. So one of the things I really love about the PPM tool set is the ability to create enterprise custom fields and lookup tables. So when you go in to PWA settings within your project online or your project server instance, you have the ability to create fields that are specific to you. So it might be you've got particular phase definitions. You might have, you might want to distinguish between capital and operating costs. You may want to mark particular projects as administrative. And so you have the ability to build these custom fields, and you have to associate them with an entity. And that brings me down to project is primarily composed of 3 entities. There are lots of other entities, but the 3 ones that really, really matter and the ones that we're going to talk about today are the project entity, the resource entity, and the task entity. And then tasks roll down to assignments, and our assignments are related to tasks, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But essentially, you have the ability to add these custom fields, and once you do, then you can pull them out via Power BI. And when you're creating fields, and when you're looking at customizing your project instance, there are a lot of questions that you need to ask yourself. You need to ask your team, your stakeholders about whether or not a particular piece of data makes sense where it is and where it should go. And I get lots of these questions almost every day. So does this field have more to do with people than with things? So that say, is it a skill? Is it a language? Is it a cost? A lot of times these things are related to people and to resources more than with particular tasks or other items. Does the field, can a single project encompass multiple values of this field? So that actually determines whether a field should be at the task level or at the project level. Do you need to create a new project every time you change this field? So think about the life cycle of your project and how fields like, here's a common one, phase. Should the phase of a project be logically better at the project level or at the task level? And you can go both ways on that subject depending upon how you want to manage your phases. Do you have to roll up cost and work accurately using this field? Does the field need standard values? Does the field need to calculate based upon other values? Is the field time phased? So there are answers that come with these that have implications for where you would create it, what entity you would create the field in, or how you would treat it. Like, for example, do you have to roll up cost or work accurately? Well, in that case, you need to use a single value field. It cannot be a multiple value field because then you won't be able to allocate that across the multiple values. You want to be able to use your sum and your average correctly. If you can embed formulas in these fields. So, if you need to calculate based on other values, you might build it off of a formula. Is the field time phased? Well, if it's time phased, then you've got, if there's a different value for each day or each hour, you need to be able to show that in the data, and you need to put it at the task level, or in some cases at the resource level if it's, say, capacity or availability. So just think about these questions when you're thinking about how to group these fields together into these entities. You want to just think through the questions here. So this is a project database entity relationship diagram. So this is sort of lays out kind of, a lot of the tables that are involved. There are hundreds of tables in this database, especially, Project Online and Project Server. You can see all of these tables down below, and you need to sort of think about how they're related. And there's a very classic relationship between these entities that I want to diagram out here. So generally, projects contain tasks. So that's an important one. Now, tasks contain assignments. So an assignment is when a resource is assigned to a task that creates an assignment. And so it's important to know that there's this entity down below there. You could have 10 resources on a given task. Be a little bit hard to manage. Certainly the best practice is to have a single owner of every task, but the system supports being able to have multiple people on a task. When you assign multiple resources to a task, you're creating an assignment for each one. And those assignments then are layered down, and those assignments are actually what show up on people's timesheets. So if you're using the task sheet or timesheet functionality within the Project Web App client, and you're talking to someone about what's showing up on their timesheet, that's actually an assignment, because that's only their part of that particular task. So it's important to know this particular relationship, and that means that when you're creating a Power BI model, that you need to create those relationships within your model for that to display any particular information. And in our exercise, what we're going to do is we're going to create, I have two Power BI files created. One has a relationship, the other does not. And what we're going to do is create a matrix so that you can see how Power BI starts to render this information. And you'll see a huge difference between those two. So that's the project database. That's a simplified version of the entity diagram. In Power BI, there is a modeling function which allows you to string all of these things together. This is a screen capture of one of those, and you'll see it gets very complex very quickly, because you've got projects, you've got tasks over here on the right, then you've got a relationship with the assignments and the resources, and then you've got time phase data, and you've got this time set over in the left. That allows you to sort of sequence the information over time, and then some workflow, some issues, and some risks. So one of the great things about the project server and the project online data model is that it connects SharePoint data, issues, risks, deliverables, documents via a project ID, so that you can actually report off of those SharePoint objects from within the project data model, project server or project online data model. So you have the ability to look at this model. And so in Power BI Desktop, when you bring up the desktop, I just wanted to sort of give you a little bit of orientation to it. So to show that model, over on the left-hand side, you would have this that sort of entity relationship diagram. That's how you can get into that model. To look at the table view, you'd click on that table icon, and then on the top there, showing the actual sort of little bar chart, that's how you get to your drawing canvas, and that's where you're placing your visualizations. What you want to do is connect your project, your Power BI file, to a data source. And so one of the first things you would do is get data, or click on recent sources, or enter data, or edit queries. That connects your Power BI out to the outside world, or in this case, your project server or your project data model. Then you would start to place visualizations on your drawing canvas, and then place your fields inside of the visualization. But what we want to talk about today is really manage relationships. So let me actually switch over to, so this is the, in Power BI Desktop, this is the public content pack. So this was just released by Microsoft. and allows you to connect. I am connected to our Jumpstart environment, so we've got a lot of data at Sensei that we use to demonstrate, and so this is connected. This is looking at that data through the lens of this particular public content pack. So again, to look at the data model, I can click on the model over here, and it switches the screen over, and I can start to see my resources, my projects, my tasks, my issues, my risks, my baseline data. So this is a pretty complex model, you know, and it is pretty functional. If I wanted to look at the tables, so then I can take a look at the data inside of each one of these. So if I wanted to look at my project table, I would click on it, and here's all the data in my project table, and I have all of these different fields that I have access to, and I can sort of take a look at it. There's a huge amount of great functionality in this tool to be able to show data. So you can see the table data, you can see the model, and then you can pull it all together in these visualizations. And in this content pack, we actually have lots of different pages, so you can see a Gantt chart, and you know, a page that's specifically focused in on cost and on milestones, and then, you know, pulling out the risks, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of good data in this content pack. I would hope that you would go and grab that. Again, that link is in the handout, so please download the handout and take a look at it. Okay, so let us zip back here. So the next thing that I want to talk about is the manage relationships dialog. So this is where you can connect the different entities together. And we'll see during the exercise that we do that it's pretty critical. So the manage relationships dialog is right up here on the ribbon, and it opens up, and you can see all of the relationships that are active in your model. Okay, and in this particular one, there's all sorts of relationships that are pulling that data together. Let me actually show you another file. So I have this is a file that I created called a simple relationship example with no relationships. And so if I click on this entity relationship diagram here, you'll see I've got projects and I've got tasks, I've got assignments and I've got resources, but I've got no relationships between any of them. Okay, so I'm not relating them. If I go into my manage relationships dialog here, there is nothing defined. Okay, so I've brought the data in, but it doesn't really make sense. And what I'm going to try to do here, I've pulled out the count of my IDs. So I've got 99 projects, I've got 182 resources, I've got 7,691 tasks and over 10,000 assignments, and I've got about 340,000 hours of assignment work. And the basic question that I want to answer is, who's working on what when? Okay, simple question. Now, I also have another Power BI file. Now, this is what we want to get to. We want to get to a project name, a resource name, and the tasks, what tasks they're working on by month. So this is our end goal, okay? And we'll notice that this item, we'll see I have relationships here. And I'll talk about what these relationships are and what they mean in a moment here. So to create a relationship, you would go into the Manage Relationships dialog, all right, and then you want to basically join tables together. And the nice thing about the project data model is that it's got IDs all over the place. So it's got a common key in resources. So assignments have a resource ID and resources have a resource ID. So if I want to link those two tables together, I would go into the edit relationship. I would create an assignment. I would choose the assignment table, the resource table, and then I would choose the common key, which is resource in both places. And then it will try to figure out the cardinality. So cardinality just determines, is it a one-to-one relationship? Is it a many-to-one? Is it, and you'll notice that there really isn't a many-to-many relationship. In fact, Power BI doesn't handle that relationship very well. So you're really, trying to focus in on how to relate in a way that Power BI can display this information. The cross-filter direction affects your visualizations have the ability to interact with one another. It's a very interactive environment. So if I go here and I want to see, okay, how many of my risks are management escalation risks? Well, I just click on these graphics and it actually sorts the items. How many are technology related? So it's highlighting all of the other visualizations. That's that cross-filter direction that's allowing each visualization to look at the relationship, understand the cardinality, and then be able to draw back the right results for a query. So making these relationships in the right way and making them active really makes all of the difference in whether you can get data out. So I've showed you the two data model differences here. So I've got one file that has 0 relationships at all. There are no relationships defined yet. And then in the second file, I've got relationships. So I'm joining my resources table to my assignment table on the resource ID. I'm joining my assignments to my tasks via the task ID. Assignments is special because it has both a task ID and a resource ID. And then I'm joining my time phase data to my assignments because I've got a time phase table there. And I'm also joining that to the time by day. And I'm also joining my tasks to my project. So I can figure out which tasks are in which project, and they're assigned to who and when are they happening. So that's what that relationship does. So let's go through this exercise and take a look. So the idea is I've got the two different dashboards, same set of tables, looking at the same database. The key difference is one of the dashboards has relationships, the other does not. We're going to build a matrix, okay? The matrix, and as we build that matrix, you will see, oh my gosh, I just can't do it if I don't have these relationships. And it's a pretty common question. People are asking when you get to you're sitting in front of the big boss and they're like, what do you mean you can't do that work? Well, everybody's too busy. Well, what are they working on? I better go build a matrix and tell you why people are over allocated. How much work are people spending month to month? What projects have what resources and what tasks? Maybe they're working on something that's stupid and we need to reassign them. Maybe they've got too much work and we need to get them more help. But this is the question that we're answering here. Okay, so let's take a look at how this works. All right, so I'm going to start. This is the no relationship one, okay? So I still can see all my data. I've got all my data in it, but let's start building this matrix and see what I can come up with. So I'm going to say new visual. All right, and I'm going to start dropping in projects. So sorry, this is a little bit hard to see, but I'll call it out. So first thing I want to do is Well, I'll draw it. That's the count of project name. I've got the wrong type of visual, so I'm going to choose a, let's drop that into rows. Okay, so here I've got my project name. Okay, and then I've got from my project entity. Now I want to know what resources are on it, so I'm going to take my resource name and I'm going to drop that in here as well. So let me grab my resource name and drop that into a row as well. So you'll notice I'm only showing, because this is a matrix, I've got project name and resource name. If I want to drill down, I can see my resources. Okay, here's my list of resources, and here's my project name. Okay, but I really want to see both of them together. I can't display that. And the reason why I can't display that, that's a halfway point, is because there's no relationship between it. Now let me go get my tasks. So let me go grab my task name here as well. Task name. Okay, so I can drill down from project name to resource name to task name. But again, there's no connection between the data, so I'm not seeing that. And where I really run into trouble here is when I start to pull in other columns. So the column I really want is time, month of the year. And boom, I can't display this visual. And that's because there's just no relationship there. So I've pretty much hit a dead end with these relationships. I've got all of the data, but because they're not related, it's just not working out for me. So I'm going to minimize this one. Let's go back to the other examples. So this one, I've got a connection between my tasks, my projects have a relationship with tasks. I have a relationship between assignments and resources. So this is kind of a typical relationship here. So let me actually build this matrix again with some relationships, and you can start to see the power of these relationships. So let's do that again. Let me grab a new visual. All right, and I'll turn it into a matrix. And then I will pull in the project name as a row. Okay, so I've got my project name. Now I'm going to pull in my resources because I want to see who's on those projects. So I'm going to pull up my resource name. Okay, so now when I start to drill into this, let me go down another level. I can still see the resources, but when I drill down a halfway point here, one level, now I'm seeing, okay, for a tenant renewal R100, I've got Brett, Dale, a generic local resource, Greg, Ken, Kenneth, a labor budget resource, et cetera, and some unassigned resources. Then I've got a different group of people. So this is telling me, okay, I'm actually making some headway here. So this is very exciting. So now I'm going to go down to tasks. And let's pull out the task name here. And I'm going to drop this underneath. So now if I want to drill down another level, now I can see that I've got, this is the project, here's the resource, this is the task that Brett is working on. So I've got a great relationship here. Dale, oh my God, he's so busy. Look at all the stuff that he's working on here. It's crazy. He can't work on all of that. He's going to be too busy. So already I can start to build, to understand some things about this this data, but wait, there's more. So let's keep going here. So now what I want to do is let's pull out of time. let's pull out the column of the time, month, of year. Okay, so now I want to see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. That's good, and I can probably also pull out a fiscal. I have some fiscal dimensions here as well as some years, but let's just leave it. Let's assume that this is all in one calendar year, which is a bad assumption to make, but let's do it for the time being. The last piece of this is I want to pull out from the assignment time phased. I want to look at the work. So I can actually make this a little bit bigger. So assignment work, and I'm going to put that in the value column. So now I can see the data that is rolled up for a given month. And let me grab this and make this a little bit bigger so I can see my total. So I can see, I can scroll up and I can see, okay, what are people working on for each item? And then I can see how much work is happening in each project, okay? So that's pretty cool. Now I can see, who's working on what, how much they're working on. Now, sometimes you want to, if you go down each step in the matrix, you can open it up and see the tasks that people are working on. Sometimes you want to answer a separate question, and this is always an exciting question, which is not so much by project, but let's look at this by resource. So when you look at the task usage view, this is very similar to a usage view in the project desktop client. Sometimes you're asking the question not, I want to know what a resource is doing. I'm not looking at this from a project perspective. I want to look at it from a resource perspective. So I want to roll up all of those assignments to the resources. So if we do that, what I can do is I can actually take this resource name and change it to be on top here. So now I'm rolling up all of Albert's work for a given month, and I can see, so that's just going down. Let's go down, use this button. So now I can see which projects Albert's working on and say, okay, in February, he's got 462 hours of work. Maybe that's too much. Which are the projects that I don't need him to work on? So just by shifting the order of resource name, project name, task name, I get an additional sort of insight into, what is Albie Lopez, what projects are Albie Lopez working on? What projects are Alex Cintron working? And I can roll up that data. Now, as I said, this is just looking at the months, and so one key thing here is that you want to make sure that you're only looking at the particular time frame that you're looking at. So you would want to use some slicers, and so let's add in a slicer here. Time, month of the year, time, quarter. Well, I can do it by fiscal period, fiscal quarter. Let's see. I'm going to add a slicer here. So that's this guy. And I will do fiscal period year in here. So this will give me, let me change this into a list so that we can see this list. So this is important because you want to filter for a given period. So if I wanted to just look at 2017, if I wanted to just look at 2018, so I've got data, in 2018 for this. And So you also notice I have some skipping months because I don't have data there, and the matrix actually won't display data for items that don't have any data here. So it can be a little bit challenging. Anyway, that's adding a slicer, that's building a matrix, that's looking at the various relationships, even though I'm looking at the same set of data. Unless you have the relationship, that those matrices won't work. So let's go back to our PowerPoint slide and finish out here, and then we will go into questions. So you'll see when I built it without relationships, I tried to do projects, resources, tasks, time, and work, and it told me can't determine the relationships between these fields. When I did it with relationships, then I was able to zero in on, build out the whole matrix. I was able to get data from the different entities within project and be able to start seeing real numbers between those, that Power BI was able to report back to me what it had because it understood the relationship between the data. So I hope that this is helpful. I hope that this was illustrative and good. So in conclusion, then we'll go into some questions. Relationships are great. Everyone should have a relationship if they so desire. And good relationships bring a great deal of value. So you have the ability to learn something from a great relationship. And in this case, we're learning which tasks are in which projects, which tasks have which resources assigned to them, and we're all getting that out of the relationship. And I also think that what we're seeing is that the relationship between project and Power BI is growing. I think there's a great deal of synergy there. Power BI is a great reporting tool. Project is an amazing scheduling tool and resource management tool. You put the two together and you have a great thing, because oftentimes people can't understand project level data unless it is in a format that allows them to understand it and see it. For project, so to enable project to take advantage of Power BI's capabilities, you have to think about those relationships. You have to think about the tasks, the projects, the assignments, and the resources, and be able to pull those together. Okay. So that concludes the formal presentation. Now, what I'd like to do is to open it up for questions. So if you have any questions, please pop them in the chat box that's in the control panel of the webinar, and would be happy to talk through any thoughts, comments, or ideas that you may have. Ooh, that's a great picture. That's a great question. So thank you for that, Tony. Is there a data dictionary for Project Online? Well, there's a couple of things. The short answer is no. But the more nuanced answer is yes, if you know where to look. So first of all, there is a if you go into the software development kit of Project 2013, and I don't know whether I can find that on my desktop someplace, but basically if you search for the Project 2013 SDK, there is an entity relationship diagram there, and that has most of the tables. So the project data model has been going on since, the late 90s when it started at a company called eLabor, and Microsoft bought it and has slowly been evolving and building it into this tool from the Project Central days through the Project Server days and now into Project Online. Those entities slowly morph. They've added engagement functionality. They added the portfolio management functionality. So to find that data, I would start with the Project 2013 SDK, the software development kit. Download that to your workstation, and in that is a compiled help file which has all of the has a lot of that data in it. Let me see, Project SDK. So if we go to the Project SDK on Microsoft.com, if you download this and run it, so you'll find in here, you'll find let's see if I screw everything up by installing this here. Now, I'm not exactly sure where it put that on my machine. Yeah, I could probably spend the next few hours looking for that. Let's see, Microsoft Office 2013, SharePoint Designer. Yeah, I don't know exactly where that SDK went and whether it's because I'm on Windows 10 and it's a little bit hard to find things for an old guy like me. But anyway, that's where I would start with that. So thank you for that question. Okay, you're welcome. And one of the nice things is that once you connect to a data source, then you can just play around with it. So if you go into edit, for these, you look at what your data source is. I'm looking at one of our internal data sources. But then when I say if I want to edit the particular query, you get a dialog here that allows you to edit the query. And at this point, you can understand what your source of data is, and then you can go through the process of choosing particular columns and things like that. So if I go into the settings of this, it takes me to where I need to go, and I'm looking at an OData field here, and I can choose columns. So if I don't want particular columns, I actually get a list of all of the columns in this particular entity that allows me to choose. Generally speaking, a lot of this stuff I may not care about, so I can reduce the amount of data that I'm pulling back. I can increase the time at which I'm able to get a good result by unchecking some of these. So if I don't want any of the optimizer stuff, I would just uncheck it, and then it would have another step in the process. This is kind of Photoshop-like. You've got lots of different steps that you can do, and you can see it stepwise. Okay, so my organization, this is a great question. My organization already uses Power BI. If I download Power BI and point to our project data, do I need certain privileges or access? Yes, you do. And that's an important thing. Your ID needs to have access to that data set. So so you should be a licensed user. So you need a project license to be able to access the project data. You need a Power BI Pro license to be able to access your project data and to be able to share it. And there is a setting within PWA settings that allows you to access that data. Let me actually show that to you. So if I go into a environment, and I'm an administrator, I go into PWA settings, and there is I don't know whether it's a category or a group permission, but let's go down to any one of these will do. There is a view enterprise resource data. There's view, project schedule, views, project center, business intelligence, link. There's one of these values here that needs to be set so that you can access that data. I think it's one of these here. Anyway, there is one of these that needs to be set. So your project administrator needs to make sure that you can access that data. Let's see, from organization here. Build team, edit enterprise resource data, manage, view enterprise. I think that's pretty much it, but there's probably another one. I can look it up and get back to you on that. But the nice thing about Power BI is it's read-only. Here's a look at one in the Power BI service. So the answer is no. Oh, global permissions, access project server reporting service. Thank you, Matthias. I appreciate they've got the people are answering my own questions. That's awesome. Appreciate it. Okay, so can you mess anything up? And the answer is no. Power BI is a read-only environment. You're not updating these fields, so the only risk that you have is really just if you build a huge query and you're pulling lots of data, you might slow things down. In the Project Online environment, using OData, there are limits to what OData will return so that you're less likely to do that. In SQL, you could definitely, pull back tons of data and it might slow things down. But generally speaking, Power BI is a read-only environment. The worst thing you can do is build a visual that doesn't display any data. You can get confused about how the joins work, and it'll return nothing. It'll tell you it returns nothing, and then you get to go fix it. So I personally love the experimentation piece to this. I love being able to take a look at different data. And this, by the way, this public content pack from Microsoft has a great amount of data in it, a great set of relationships. There's some cool custom fields that were built to support some of this stuff. So if you want to take a look at this and get into it, certainly go into GitHub and go get this file and then download it and then start working on it. Because you may not use the department field in your company. You may use another field, and it's really easy just to select the item, change the field that it's connected to, and move on. Okay. Any more questions? We've got about 3 minutes left here. But I really appreciate your participation, and I hope that this was helpful for folks. And okay. Well, thank you. Thank you for attending. Really appreciate it. And again, please download the handout in the handout box on the control panel there. And then I'm going to stop this recording here in a minute or so. And then this will be posted out on our site, so you can download the recording. If I went too fast on something, you want to review it. But all good. All right. Well, we'll call it a day. Thank you so much for your time and effort, and we'll hopefully hear from you soon. Take care.